YouTube, how's it going? The Goat House is back with some more cap solutions for NFL teams, making some cuts, showing what players maybe can't be cut and what teams could do to clear some cap space. We've done quite a few of these already. We're going division by division this video for the AFC South. Later today will be the NFC South, and then one more day of these. Tomorrow we'll have the AFC, which is Saturday, the 30th. We'll have the AFC and NFC West. So we got you covered here. There's plenty of free agency videos, rankings, predictions on the channel. Plenty more to come. We're going to have rebuilds for teams or what they should do this offseason. Full draft coverage. We got you. More content than anybody, so please subscribe. Smash that like button. Check us out on Twitter. Check out that Sided app where you can win Amazon gift cards by talking football. And there'll be a link in the description and comments for any of that. There's that Twitter. Make sure you follow that. It's very important. A lot of constant NFL talk on there. So check it out. But for this series, we're using this website called Spotrac, if that's how you pronounce it. I'll put a link in the comments. It just makes it easier they have the listed, cap figures here for each player this year, what their cap space is at. Something to keep in mind, that cap space numbers is worst case scenario going into the offseason. That cap number for each team is projected to be around 175, and that's factoring in that 175 million for each team. But I think it could be a little more than that, so that'll create a little bit more room for teams. Starting with the Houston Texans here of the AFC South, negative 17.1 million. Not good. Not good at all there. So no first round pick. And if they had their first round pick, it'd be a very good pick. So that's pretty tough. And then Deshaun Watson wants out. Messy situation. Let's see if we can kind of fix it up a little bit. We'll circle back to Deshaun Watson at the end of the Texans here. And maybe J.J. Watt as well. But let's start with Whitney Merciless. They gave him a contract not too long ago, and a little surprised about that at the time. And then looking at it now, if they cut him, negative 3.1 million. He was pretty underwhelming in terms of his productivity, really, but getting pressure. But they can't really cut him. Another guy, that could be involved in trade. Him and J.J. Watt could actually be involved in trade talks if they want to rebuild, but it sounds like they want to keep their strong pieces there. And Deshaun Watson obviously could be centered around trades as well, but we can come back to that. Randall Cobb's another one that I was a little confused about the signing, and then cutting him would be negative 1.7 million, so they can't really cut him either. David Johnson, when he played, he looked pretty good for them, so I'd imagine they keep him. But just to see if they cut him, they can save a pretty decent number there, 6.7 million. See if they actually do that. Some offensive linemen they'll probably keep, but they do need to retool that. They signed Eric Murray last offseason, not a guy, he only saved $218,000, so is it worth it? Duke Johnson, I'd imagine they cut, because you could save that $5 million. Why would you keep David and Duke Johnson? There's teams that don't pay their starters or don't want to, they don't have a cap hit from their starters of that amount, and we're talking their backups. So if they hang on to David Johnson, which I expect they will, imagine they cut Duke Johnson, save $5 million. It looks pretty good for them. You go down the list. There's some guys Darren Fells is pretty important to them. Their offense, not super important, but he's 35. Do they want to move on from him? To save 2.3, I think it's a possibility. Brandon Dunn's played a lot of snaps for them, but they got other guys stepping up. Men who maybe Blacklock can step up this year. They have J.J. Watt as well, but more of a pass rusher from their 3-4 defensive line. But if they cut Brandon Dunn, which I'm not saying it's a strong possibility, but they could save that $3.1 million. Looking down here, I don't know if these guys, Jordan Akins, it's not really worth the cutting him for that much money. Ejiofor hasn't really done much. They probably cut a lot of guys that can save just under $1 million. So, you can go down the list. They'll probably cut quite a few of those guys like that. But, looking at the big names, not a whole bunch you can save, but we got it down to -5. And, again, that's worst-case scenario if they cut, if this exact thing happens. But kind of going back up, what happens if they trade Deshaun? We'll come back to Deshaun Watson. What happens if they trade Whitney Merciless, if they can find a trade partner for him? Because remember, if they cut him, it ends up being negative. If you trade him, $7.3 million. That's a pretty good number. You're in the positive there. So maybe you look to trade a guy like Whitney Merciless here. And then J.J. Watt, I'd recommend that they trade him because by the time they get things going, sure, they can be if you have Deshaun Watson, if you keep him, you can be a good team in a matter of, one offseason, really. I mean, they won a playoff game a year ago. They were up 24-0 against the Chiefs too, so they put up a pretty good fight. So it's not hard for this team to get back on track, but when they're back on track to maybe being a Super Bowl contender, it might be that time where J.J. Watt, 34, 35 years old then, has the injury concern. I think you should trade him because I think you can get those picks that you desperately need, and you can save some money. So they should trade him, in my opinion. That saves a whopping $17.5 million. So I'd recommend that. And then just to see what happens if they trade Deshaun Watson, they'll actually have negative. But if he refuses to play and if you get 3 first-round draft picks at least for him, it could be worth it. But you're going to need to make some of those other moves. If you trade Deshaun Watson, you better be trading J.J. Watt. I'll say that. You better be. I mean, come on now. Because they're pretty much in rebuild mode if you're trading Deshaun Watson. J.J. Watt really shouldn't be a part of it, even though he's a hell of a ball player right now as it is with Deshaun Watson, in my opinion, based on the cap space you can clear and the draft picks you can get. So that's kind of why I say that. But pretty bad situation to be in overall. But as you can see, you can make it a decent situation, I guess, if that's what you want to call it. Moving on to the Colts, they're looking pretty. This is worst case scenario heading into the offseason, $61.2 million. That's worst case. Again, that cap number could be a bit higher. So maybe as high as 71 million perhaps. But yeah, sometimes it's kind of bad when you don't have anybody you can cut to clear space, but not in this case. The Colts really don't have anybody they can cut, but it's a good situation because that means they have good contracts out there and they have a lot of cap space, so that's okay. They do have quite a few free agents. We'll see who they want to bring back, but we'll go down the list here just to see some scenarios. Grover Stewart's a pretty good nose tackle for them. If they really want to go big, like huge in free agency, and they want to clear some space, 4.5. He doesn't play a whole bunch of snaps, but that's because he's just a true nose tackle. But they like him on the obvious run situations, so I don't think they cut him. They still like Jack Doyle, but Mo Alley Cox and Trey Burton, they like them. Maybe they want to, get them back in the mix there. So, and they could do that while keeping Doyle, but just to see 4.2, it's just not worth it to me. Got some stud players here. Rock Ya-Sin needs to pick it up a little bit. He's only 25 years old. And then you see some rookies, Michael Pittman, Jonathan Taylor. So that's what, the contracts they've given out. They've kind of been careful. At times it's like, all right, they got all this money and they're not doing anything. Why aren't they doing anything? But they're being safe. There's no sure thing. Free agents last year, they go out and trade for Buckner. That kind of takes part. And now going into this year, I think this is where they make their big time moves, because they got a great coaching staff, they got a great offensive line. They do need a left tackle because of Costanzo retired, which kind of is expected either this year or next year. We've kind of been talking about that for a while. But now they're in position to kind of make these moves here. Kemoko Turay been a little underwhelming, mainly because of injuries. 26, I don't think they cut him. Banagu, waiting for him to step up. Tyquan Lewis. Yeah, he was more of a defensive end at Ohio State, and they moved him to 3 technique, and that experiment is it's really funny because we talked about that with the Vikings too, because the Vikings got Jalen Holmes from Ohio State that same year, while the Colts got Tyquan Lewis. They were both defensive ends and pretty productive, and both teams switched them to D tackles, so they both saw something with those guys. And I think both kind of failed in that. I think I like those guys at defensive end. So have they kind of ruined him? Do they want to move on? $1 million, not worth it. I liked him at D end at Ohio State. I don't know. Speaking of Ohio State, Paris Campbell's coming back this year. That'd be fantastic. These guys you can cut some of these guys for about a million. Jordan Wilkins, they like still as a running back 3. Technically, it's almost like a running back 2. Neem Hines is kind of your utility guy there, if you want to call it that. So they'll keep Wilkins. I think you'll see if Eason, gets the nod this year. There's a lot of young guys here, and Paul Perkins probably can go. So you see 920,000. They don't even need to do these things, but they're going to cut some of those guys probably just. Not because they need to, but because they're going to bring in some rookies, even some undrafted guys that'll be a little cheaper, and they have the opportunity to take those spots and then have the potential as well. So, the Colts are in a pretty damn good situation. But again, they do have some free agents. They need to add top-tier talent at receiver. They need a starting left tackle. You need another pass rusher. Justin Houston's a free agent. They need one anyways. Corner. Definitely need another corner. Xavier Rhodes a free agent. But they're in position to kind of make those moves. So we'll see what they do this offseason. See if this is the offseason where they really go from, kind of just a playoff team or borderline playoff team to maybe a contender. We'll see. The Jacksonville Jaguars, looking really good as well. Worst case scenario here heading into the offseason before cuts, $72.5 million in cap space. Looking good. You almost expect that from the Jaguars. So they got the first overall pick. They're not tied down to a lot of guys, really. So you kind of expect that, but it's a great situation, especially because there's a lot of teams this year in rough shape. It's the worst shape maybe in NFL history teams have been in. So it looks even better than normal. I think these guys at the top, obviously they hang around on to. The interior guys are pretty big names. Andrew Norwell, AJ Cann. They could play a little better, though, for how much. Just to see. You can save $9 million. Norwell was a big-time addition. You see that cap, was that $15 million is the cap hit for them. We should play a little better, but new system, better quarterback will be under center. So these guys will play better. Linder's one of the better centers in football. Schobert, they just signed this offseason. I guess the knock on him is his speed, but solid linebacker for them. Of course, they'll keep him around. Hopefully we get a little more out of Josh Allen this year. I think big piece is their interior defensive line is bad, probably worse in football, where it's just so much is on the pass rushers themselves. There's no interior pressure. Tyler Eifert, I believe this is an option, if I'm not mistaken. So if you decline the option, $4.9 million, or even if you kind of just let him go this year, actually it might not be. There's some dead cap there actually, so ignore that. About $5 million they could save, but he ended up being a pretty big piece. See how he is with a new quarterback. They can hang on to him. Tavon Bryan's been pretty disappointing, but different, maybe a different scheme, different coaching staff. Only 25, so they'll probably hang on to him. Gerard Wilson, they could find better here. Only $2 million. It's probably the safety they keep. Al Woods is 34. It's probably a guy you can move on from. And you kind of get to some Rashawn Melvin. They can move on from Melvin. $1.4 million. Josh Oliver was a stud at San Jose State, kind of waiting for him to step up. So maybe they feel comfortable about him so they can move on from Eifert. So that's a possibility. A lot of young guys, just depth guys. And we got, guys like this they can move to Middleton. They can move on from, but it's not that much money. They don't absolutely have to. McCray, players like this that they just, they can just kind of clear a little bit of space, but kind of clear those rooms for the room for the young guys they're about to bring in. Do they keep Minshew on as a backup? They actually probably can get some value in terms of a trade. So let's just say they trade him. You don't save a whole bunch of money, so is it worth it if you want another pick? Maybe so. So we bumped it up a little bit, kind of worst case scenario if this exact scenario happens. But they got 11 draft picks. They got a lot of cap space. Maybe more of an appealing spot with Urban Meyer there. People knowing they're about to get Trevor Lawrence. So, they can turn things around, really in free agency and the draft here. So the Jaguars are sitting pretty, especially when a lot of teams are sitting in nightmare situations. Can the Jaguars be a worst to first team this year? It's a tough division to do it in with the Colts and the Titans. And if Deshaun Watson's on the Texans, moving on to the Titans. The AFC South champs here, back-to-back years, looking very good. We'll see if they can keep that going. Negative $8.4 million doesn't look too good, but they could possibly make some space here. Some tough decisions coming up for the Tennessee Titans because Malcolm Butler, veteran corner, he started off a little slow. Tough task because the Titans got absolutely no pressure, so they had, these corners basically had to cover forever. But started pretty bad, but he really picked it up at the end of the year. He played quite well, I thought, at the end of the year. So do they want to keep rolling with that? But if you cut him, you save $10.2 million, and just like that, you're in the positive. So that's tough. Other corner, I don't see them cutting both these guys. Adoree Jackson's pretty good. He's still only 26, but man, I think he's had injuries almost in every season. And you kept thinking last year, all right, he's going to come back this week. He's going to come back. No. And it ends up being, lasting forever there, but he finally comes back. But, maybe you want to move on from him instead at a 10.2 so a little bit more, but in the same range there. So one or the other there probably. I don't see both. I'd imagine they stick with the younger guy, but maybe that'll be a decision for their medical staff if they don't view him as staying healthy. They're not confident he can complete a season. Then you probably should cut him. Adam Humphries, they probably can move on from him. It's not a whole lot here, I don't believe. Yeah, $4.5 million. Move on from him. That's tough though, because if they don't view they can get Corey Davis back, and then you're pretty much A.J. Brown and Khalif Raymond, So you're pretty thin on receiver, but I'm okay with kind of building some, through the middle rounds or maybe some day 2 of the draft. Seem to be able to hit on guys like that, like they did with A.J. Brown. So maybe Humphries doesn't get cut unless they think they can get Davis back, or they're confident about replacing him, even though like Davis Humphries not the same type of receiver. Getting thin. They don't really want to get thin at that position. Vaccaro's been good for them up into this year. I thought he had a pretty rough year. Again, it was tough for secondary players, but they could move on from him and save 3.9. Is it worth cutting him to save 3.9? They can maybe Amani Hooker maybe could bump up and play that strong safety position. It's a possibility. Another guy, Rashaan Evans, I expected a lot more for this year, but he was pretty underwhelming, but they're definitely not going to cut him. Isaiah Wilson I didn't like that pick at the time, and then he ended up being having off-the-field issues, so that looks like a terrible pick. Some people probably just pissed at him, want to move on from him. If they cut him, it's a negative, so they're not going to do that. Moving down the list, a lot of these guys are cheap. There's some of their big-time players here. A.J. Brown, Nate Davis. Like I said, Hooker could step up. Christian Fulton could step up. Deshaun Kaiser, they really need to keep him around. Some of those guys probably be cut. They do have Chester Rogers too, but I mean these guys are probably just depth for the late season run there. So I mean they got in the positive, but at the same time of getting in, that's kind of the good sign. They were negative. We got them in the positive around $12 million, but they had to cut some big time players here. Malcolm Butler, Kenny Vaccaro, big time player, Adam Humphries. I'm not saying they do all that, but it's a possibility. They may have to make some tough decisions there because they need to, figure out, Corey Davis, they bring him back, or they get somebody else, they get better in that position next to A.J. Brown, cornerback, pass rusher, positions like that, they gotta clear that space for. So maybe a little bit of a tough situation, but as you can see, it's possible for them to dig themselves out of a little bit of a hole. There's teams that are in much worse situations. So, we'll see. But that'll wrap up the video for the AFC South. Again, NFC South is next, and we got the 2 West divisions tomorrow, which is Saturday. And we got all kinds of content on the channel, a lot more to come, more than anybody out there. So hopefully you can join us for all that. Subscribe, turn notifications on, smash that like button. All that would be much appreciated. Make sure you follow that Twitter as well. But that's going to do it for this one. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.